Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 805 Uncensored podcast. Today, we're actually going to be doing a panel. We're going to be talking about the latest corruptions surrounding the Black Lives Matter corruption scandal. It was the Global Foundation, not the national or any local chapter, but Black Lives Matter Global Foundation. Sorry, I'm tripping over my words right now. Excuse me. Basically, the founders of the organization got in trouble for purchasing a $6 million mansion in California. And so we're going to be having a discussion about that, the Democratic Party, the left, the right wing, and a few other things. So I'm excited to host Heather Schmidt. How's it going, Heather?
Good. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, anytime. We've also got the Paradigm. Thanks so much for joining.
Hey,
And we've also got Aleyah Ewing. Thanks so much for joining, Aleyah.
Hi. Of course, excited to be here.
Happy to host you. And we've also got Desmond. Thanks so much for being here, Desmond.
hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Welcome to ready for the conversation.
Yeah, so first things first, I'm going to have each of you do an opening statement on how you felt about this story and just your general first reactions. So, Heather, I'll start with you.
For me, the thing that sticks out is I guess the message getting caught up in the organization. I think that this is one of those things where, regardless of where people stand on the purchase of the mansion itself, it kind of taints the message of Black Lives Matter, right? The movement versus the what did you say it was? BLM
GF.
G, yeah. And so I just, this is like it always comes down to a bigger picture for me, which is like, I feel like especially local organizers really need to figure out how to like have those conversations to make sure that these kinds of incidences, don't become what the message is about, right? Because I think that there's a tendency for something like this happening to really, like I said, just ruin the overall message that they're trying to organize around, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know. It's hard for me to. I don't really want to form an opinion on like the purchase of the home itself because I mean I do think like a safe space for the Black community, right? If they're in a dangerous situation or they've um, been, gotten into whatever reason they needed the space. And then also the space, I think it said that it was for creators.
Yeah,
Is
that's
that
what they said. It was
yeah,
for
and
like a studio for
I mean I'm
creators and influencers.
yeah, I mean I'm obviously supportive of that. And I also don't know as a non-Black person if I have really like a place to comment on the reason to purchase the home.
Hmm.
I'm more focused on just like I said, that message of Black Lives Matter. Like I don't, as a supporter, don't want it to be tarnished by that type of a thing. I ran like Jordan. I ran for city council in 2020, and you know, the first thing that my opponent did was put up these pictures of me and my kids at a Black Lives Matter rally. And he's like, she wants to defund the police. And I was like, again, this conflation of these like ideas that kind of, get out there and take a life of their own, um, as opposed to just supporting the sentiment that duh, Black lives do matter. Like, what the fuck is wrong with that? Right? I mean, so for me, it's that bigger picture. I don't want this to turn into what the not the organization, but the movement is about, right? Or remembered for.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the main reasons that I wanted to do this panel is to erase the confusion there and clear it up for people because there is a constant conflation there. And it's intentional, but also unintentional based on ignorance.
But I
Uh,
also think if I could just add,
yeah.
one more thing is I think that like it does raise a really important issue for me with like organizations that especially social justice organizations that there has to be like we have to have more accountability, and I love that the Democratic Party is gonna be a part of this conversation because, like, people want more transparency in their groups, right? And they
Mhm.
want more accountability, and they don't want, to feel like, they're donating money and then they are gonna go buy a $6 million mansion, right? And so I feel like there does need to be more, I don't know, transparency about that too. That I do.
Sure. Paradigm, what do you think?
I think that the world that we live in is very divided by both identity and a crisis to appeal to certain people's, let's say, empathy. And for me, I was a huge defender of I don't care, they could buy a house, they could do whatever. That doesn't stand for, as uh, Heather said, that doesn't stand for what we're advocating for. That doesn't stand for anything that sits in the way of what the message that we're trying to get across. But as I take a step back, I realize that, and I hate this argument, the optics, how it looks, I feel like when you're doing something, you got to move a certain way, and I mean that in all walks of life. You can't say one thing and then do another. Now for BLM and the organization, I understand if it was like a government grant, we're matching donations, it was like massively crowdfunded, and they're like, okay, we're gonna do this and build this space around that. As Heather yet again said, transparency. Let us know what's coming. Oh, we're having these people for talks at this place. We're doing invites from across the country to do live panels on these issues. We're doing fundraisers here. This is where our base of operations will be. It's going to be heavily gated because, Black Wall Street, bring up some history, apply some thought to it. When you don't have the thought and you just see Black Lives Matter buy $6 million mansion, for some people, they might not want to look into the nuance of it. They might see the words, see the title. Oh, I knew they were taking my money. I knew those Black people were good for nothing. And it's like, no, there is nuance. You're getting caught in by the headline, but you gave rise to the headline by doing that and not prefacing it with, look, when the New York Post or Fox News talks about it, here's the article actually showing what they built it for. They've been talking about it for months. Oh, we can't get into that. Oh, they're just lying. Okay, now we got hit pieces to go against them. See, whenever we try to do something good for Black people, it's about it. But we got the proof. Without the proof, without the transparency, you're losing me. So I think it's a bad move altogether, but not for the reason of like, oh, they're not allowed to. It's you didn't give me the reason. You gave everyone else the ability to speak for you. And in a movement like this, you got to have that person front and center that says, this is what it's about. This is what we're doing. Fuck all that other noise. And that's my take on it.
Aleyah, what do you think?
So I think that personally, my opinion on the matter is like not something that is really important. Just because I think as someone who isn't Black, I really, like, as a white passing person, do not get the, ability to be able to talk about things like this. Certainly not the ability to critique an organization and how they decided to spend their money supporting Black creators. I think that everybody would spend the money differently. So it's not really fair to be like, well, personally, if I had $6 million, I wouldn't buy a house. It's like, well, if you want $6 million to spend it on something other than buying a house, you can fundraise $6 million. This organization put in the time and the resources to be able to get that $6 million. That way they could buy a house for Black creators, regardless of whether or not I support that. And I think that I think that the house itself was in poor taste in the sense that, like, of course, there's better things you could do with that money, but there's better things that all of us could do with that money. I could not buy a toaster and donate that money to a humanitarian organization, right? But we're not pressing individual people for not giving up those things. And $6 million, of course, is a lot of money to be putting into one thing that is only going to be supporting a few people, when instead it could be supporting, hundreds or thousands of people. But I also think that when you make the decision to donate to an organization, you give up the ability to say what you're donating that money for. Same when you're donating to candidates. When you donate money to candidates running for office, they get to use that money however they want once you give it to them. They're not obligated to use it for a certain thing. If they end up losing and they have leftover funds and they want to run for a different position, even if you didn't donate to them for running for that different position, they still get to use your money in that particular way. And I think that that's exactly how every organization functions. When you donate something, you give up the right to say what they're going to use that money for. And so I think that we're spending a lot of time critiquing this organization when in reality we could be critiquing ourselves using that exact same logic. And I think that the right has been making this a lot more propaganda-y and using it to critique Black Lives Matter than I think it deserves credit for. So those are my thoughts.
Sure. Well said. Desmond, what do you think?
I'm gonna try to break this into two parts. I think the first part, I'm just gonna echo basically what was just said by Aleyah. I think when you do give money to an organization, like after that, they should be able to use the funds however they want to. But I'm gonna rather just focus on something else, which has been bothering me since 2020. So not to jump ahead too far in the questions here, but I think my biggest issue with the Black Lives Matter organization is the fact that they named their organization Black Lives Matter. For instance, when I am out here in Red State, Montana, people who are on the left, when they say Black Lives Matter, they're referring to the actual like statement itself, Black Lives Matter. And when people on the right say Black Lives Matter, they're referring to the organization because the right-wing propaganda machine has been relentless with tying that organization to that phrase, so that when people on the right hear that, all they can think about is the organization, not the actual phrase that a Black person's life actually matters and why that statement came about in the first place. So, the organization probably shouldn't have to be subject to this kind of pressure, but at the end of the day, they kind of are. And I think years going by, knowing how the right-wing media has attacked them for this, I think they would have actually probably done a benefit to all of us by just changing their name. I think about like something like the Sunrise Movement, for instance. If they had named themselves the Climate Crisis and then they had gone out and done something shady, then the right-wing media could have attacked the Climate Crisis for anything involving climate change. It's kind of unfortunately put us in an awkward situation because we do have to finally like consistently combat this narrative. Whenever like somebody who is independent or right-leaning in this country says Black Lives Matter, they're always talking about this damn organization. And I'm just tired of it, honestly. I really am, because at the end of the day, it should be about the phrase, but we can't even get to finding solutions because we're still arguing over whether or not we're talking about the phrase or a group of people. And it's just completely idiotic. So not a whole lot we can do about it right now other than just keep having these conversations. But I think the organization could have did us all a favor by just changing their damn name at some point.
All right. I agree. Is there any statements that anybody would like to respond to? Any disagreements or anything?
No, I didn't have any disagreements with anyone. I think everyone made some pretty solid points here. I think, for me, this really comes down to combating propaganda. The right-wing media has been in lockstep trying to turn this into, basically the same thing they do with everything. They take a phrase and then they conflate what the phrase means and then they pound it to death. And so that by the time the normal person gets around to it, they don't know what the original meaning of it was. They do this with everything. They do this with socialism, with defund the police, anything involving climate change. It's a tried and true method. And we need a better way to combat it because, like time and time again, we find ourselves on the other end being like, how did this happen again?
See, and that's my issue. Okay, and that's why like I don't have a disagreement with anybody. There's a funny joke. I don't know who made this joke, but there was a take on it was VGHS. They had like this agreement panel, and it was just like, yes, I agree with you. I have to stop you because I need to agree with you real quick. And that's us. But what I want to add to that, it makes me stutter to say there is an obvious solution to this. I hate that a lot of the problems that Black Lives Matter, these movements have, are just obvious problems. Like there is no, because sorry, so to relate why I'm even thinking about this, we had mentioned branding and the idea of being able to propagate nonsense or negativity towards a movement, towards a group of people, anything by just attaching names to names. That's how brand names work. You hear, oh, Gucci got into a lawsuit over sexual assault claims, and that's like 5 people. But it's narrow. It could be the brand, it could be those people, but there's a lock to it. You find out that it's some random dude who was wearing a Gucci belt. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I don't care. The thought process has to start at one point and follow its way all the way down to the bottom. And I feel like Black Lives Matter shouldn't have to justify these things, because anybody who looks 5 seconds past their face should be able to say, oh, that's the answer. Of course that wasn't, they just right, but they don't do that. So not only do we need to find a new way to combat the propaganda, but I feel like there should be some people who are in power who just say, that's a lie. You're lying. Like, I'm tired of debating you. I'm tired of sitting. Let me ask you a question, Senator. Do you believe that Black Lives Matter? Of course I do. I believe all lives matter. That's not what I asked. Do you believe that Black Lives Matter? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, then. Can you tell me if the actions of a few who have a representation or a brand called Black Lives Matter have anything to do with the grievances of Black people in this country, marginalized people in this country, they ain't just Black people? Can you see that they have a gripe that you would consider legitimate if you detach them from the name? Oh, is it okay then? Why are you sitting here right now? Like, that's it. I don't want to sit here and like have this. Oh, well, they could. I need the obvious. The obvious is you're lying. And I don't know why more people don't just say, let's focus our efforts on saying this is a lie. That's it. We can make our jokes on Twitter about it. I love it. I love the ratios. But like, I need them to hit where it hurts, and that's that wallet and that primetime television.
And I think also, like, as a candidate, like, trying to have, like, these conversations, it just gets muddied, and you wanna, like, so much of what you do, like, in the community as a candidate is, when you're running, right? Because 'Cause you're going out and you're talking to people, and, like, these are like, even when you lose, like, which I did, I lost, but I still had a lot of meaningful conversations, right? But then I had probably 10 times more that were just caught up in this, what ended up being a distraction. Well, do you support Black Lives Matter, so do you support the organization? Do you wanna defund the police? Are you a Marxist? Are you a it just becomes, like you just said, focus, and it loses the total focus of, what the conversation is that you're supposed, like, you're trying to have, Like, a candidate like myself, in a community that has some real racism problems. I mean, the high school had all kinds of issues in the last couple of years with kids doing some neo-Nazi stuff and some white power things, and one of the Black Lives Matter, protests was all high school girls that were out there, like, that organized it, and this group of high school boys came and they were, like, screaming, racist shit at these kids, and it's like, these are the conversations I wanted to be having, like, what can we do in our community, like, on the community level to organize and stop this, right? But then it just totally lost focus by talking about the organization and, well, do you support defunding the police? Does this mean you're gonna defund our police? It just gets, you know, loses focus. It just totally loses that, ability to have that conversation.
The activists need much more of a say in the conversation instead of like the corporate people
Yeah.
that are associated with the PR campaigns for the BLM organization. The actual activists, the people on the ground that are doing all the work. And I think they're just rubbed the wrong way by this because a lot of these people are out in the streets facing like $1 million lawsuits because they were out there for George Floyd. And then they see the organization purchasing a $6 million house and they just feel like completely left out to dry.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask you guys, I'll start with Heather again. Have your views towards BLM, the organization I'm talking about as a whole, have they evolved or changed at all since 2020?
So, not really, and, that's just being honest about myself. I never really paid much attention to what was going on in the organization. Like I said, I was always more concerned about, like, that message and that community conversation about what we could do. Um, as support for the Black community, which, I mean, Jordan and I live in a county that has a very, very small Black population. In the city that I ran, only 1.6% of the city identified as African American. And so,
Aleyah's from Simi as well. She's just
oh,
on the East
okay.
Coast right now.
Yeah, and I just moved to Simi and from where I ran for office. And I mean, I wanted to start having conversations about actually why people are not more comfortable moving into our community. Why we don't have a more diverse community here. Um, so I want to say no, not really. My opinions have not changed just because I've always been more focused on that message. And for me, that message hasn't changed. Of course, Black Lives Matter. What kind of a person would say they don't? I mean, really, it's just,
I've met a lot of them.
I know, I'm sure you have. I mean, I actually met a lot of them when I was running. Also, it was eye opening for me.
Will somebody
But
please think of the white people?
yeah, I don't know.
Think of the billionaires.
But
Unfortunately,
no.
that it really has been what I've heard.
Yeah. So no, though, to the question about the organization, it hasn't, just because I've tried to focus my time on like what I can do um as a support, again, as a non-Black person, I don't feel like there are a lot of things I really have a right to comment on, um just because it's not like a part of my experience, and I just more want to like
Just be an
follow.
ally.
Yeah, I wanna be an ally and support and, um, you know, so I focus more on the message.
Yeah, Paradigm, what do you think? I
You're
can't hear you. You're
muted.
muted.
Gamer moment, sorry. I think my views on it have changed. I just want to address really quickly. I appreciate that because there's a lot of people, and Desmond is maybe a little bit more familiar with what I'm about to say, but there are a lot of people who will take the time out to open their mouths about things that they can't fully grasp, and they create channels of discourse about a conversation that doesn't even include, or literally like they'll have one or two people who live it, and the conversation gets like crossed because they don't get that it's coming from a personal place. This isn't just facts and figures. I could tell you the humans that are affected by the words that we're speaking right now. So I just want to say I appreciate y'all for consistently mentioning that. I know it's not. I know especially for some people, they'll give you that bullshit. Oh, you're doing it because you don't want to offend anybody. Blah blah. They're like, I don't do that whole like. It, like, for you to say it, I know you mean it. Like, that's all I care about. Anyway, I think my views have changed, but only because of what we mentioned before about branding. I see the weaponizing of the movement by the organization as far as through the lens of other people's eyes. So I feel like we need to have a refocus because we had so much momentum during a pandemic. Now people are out there. I understand the workforce is opening, the benefits. There was a bunch of factors that played that gave people the time. We're not here to say, oh, it died down because nobody's interested. Like, things got in the way with capitalism.
Mhm.
But I feel like we need a refocus where now the big, we had Kim Kardashian speaking out and Chloe was doing a Pepsi commercial. That's the joke. I feel like we need a recentering and a refocusing on who's speaking out for the movement, who's making these moves. Because now anybody can say, of course, I believe Black Lives Matter. Yay, I'm so glad that I got the words painted on Randall's Island Road. Like, that's great. Now it's time for the legislation. Now it's time for like the real moves, the solidarity and the being out in the streets. That happened. Now you saw it. Can I get some more? So I just want I want the movement to recenter, because I feel like it's very splintered and it's very affected by daily life, and it's not allowing it to, like, we're talking about how it looks that they bought a $6 million mansion. We should be talking about, damn, they finally got the funding for that mansion. Now they can house, young Black kids who are in that area who might be having domestic violence issues, sexual assault issues. There could be so much more that we could be talking about. But
Yeah.
now that it's so splintered, I couldn't say it if I wanted to,
Right. And I just got to say this real quick. I'm obviously on the extreme left, but just trying to research this, like, it was really difficult to find sources that were not hard right wing.
Mhm.
Like, I had I had to work pretty hard to find like NPR, New York Times, like they existed, but it took some work.
I
So
believe it.
yeah, Aleyah, what do you think about BLM as the organization? Do you have any views that have evolved since 2020?
So one thing that I read in or like that stuck out to me in the article that we shared around, that NPR did, was that the organization is not the movement, but the organization is the one profiting off of the movement, because the
Yes, yes,
organization
well said.
is where all of the donations are going. And so I feel like people aren't doing enough of their own individual research, and they're just Googling Black Lives Matter and they're like, this is a really big organization. Like, I have some white guilt, I'll donate to this organization. And then don't really do anything past that. Right. And they're like, well, I donated, what else is there for me to do? When it's like, well, there's so many things you could do, like you could support, candidates who do want to like defund the police. Like, that is like something you could do. You could, talk to your local legislators, whatever. But a lot of people kind of get stuck in thinking that they can only help by donating or only help financially. And then I think because of that, they get stuck inside this like little, I was going to say paradigm. They get stuck in this like little, in this little group of only donating and thinking that's their only method of action. And then like what happens is then they get upset when those donations don't go to something that they wanted it to go to. So I don't really have any opinions on, how they've changed or whether or not I agree with that. It's not my place. I just think that if people, particularly like white people, did more of their research, they would be able to donate to like their local chapter, right? Instead of trying to donate to this one large organization and then get upset when it doesn't do what you want it to do as a white person.
Really well said. Yeah,
Really
Desmond, what's
well
your
said.
take?
I think I'm in the same place that Heather was. I was not paying attention to this organization the entire time that they were really operating. Not because, no, just truth because I didn't care. I mean, like really, I really didn't care because for me, it was never about any organization that tied their name to it. And I didn't really spend any time thinking about them until I saw the attacks against them and the trying to tie them to the phrase itself. That's when I started paying attention to them. But for me, initially, it was just about the phrase, just about like the idea, just about people like creating awareness. Because, I think what's crazy for me, and this might be going a little bit further than we wanted to go in this conversation, living in an almost completely white population out here in Montana, it is a very different cultural experience for me. And one of the things that has blown my mind time and time again over the years is that some people out here have a very different definition of racism than I would anticipate someone would. It's almost as if they believe that if they're not saying the N word or they're not like lynching a black person, then they're not being racist. And so it's almost like that's like the bar. And so anything else that happens besides that, it's like that's just not racism. And so when this finally came about, this Black Lives Matter movement, it was like, yes, maybe we can finally have like a national conversation about how the fuck everyone has been messing this up for many years now. Like, racism didn't just end when you stopped putting people in trees. I'm sorry. So there's a lot of, I was hoping that would kind of like turn into what the conversation was, but it wasn't, unfortunately. But I guess to get back to your question, I've really never given this organization too much of my time. And it's been a shame to me that so much of the conversation in this country has turned into about them when it should never have been in the first place.
Yeah, it should just be about the work of the activists. Yeah,
Mhm.
totally agree.
As you brought up something that I just want to embellish on a little bit. The voice of the activists, the voice of the people on the streets, like it's always, and I know I just advocated for, okay, now let's refocus and like, where are those big people, where are they speaking? But it's like that was where the platform should have gone. When we were starting to talk about trans rights, that's where the platform should have gone. These platforms keep getting sucked up from underneath the people who are trying to make the change, and gets put in the hands of people with capital. And we all know what capital does when you gotta, I'll throw you
Rainbow
$100,000.
capitalism, LGBTQ.
You know, I'll throw you $100,000, but don't say the word gay on television. If you could just do, you got any gay people, just make sure they don't get seen, and put them in the background. But it's that though, and it sucks. And it
Racism's
sucks.
over. We took a knee with the cops.
Well, and I think that's a lot, and it's funny that you said that because weren't we just talking in our text group the other day about when Garcetti went out in the middle of that big Black Lives Matter
Yeah.
protest thing, and he took a knee
Fucking
with
Eric
them,
Garcetti.
and it's and I think to your point, Paradigm, is what I was thinking, and maybe this will segue into your next question is, uh, organizations like the Democratic Party have co-opted some of these, messages or whatever, and then they turn it into, like you said, capital. It becomes their they co-opt it and it becomes their message. Suddenly, it's Eric Garcetti's, campaign is all about kneeling, with the Black community, or you've got Biden,
Symbolism's easy.
calling
Change is
George,
hard. Structural
yeah.
change is hard. They don't want to do that. But printing a T-shirt,
Yeah. But you have Biden calling George Floyd's family from his campaign rally or
God.
whatever. And it's they I think that the larger establishment has co-ops this, and it just, again, it stops those conversations because it becomes all about the organizations, or the bigger organizations.
There's also just a flat out lack of self-awareness, right? Like on Joe Biden's part, for example. Like he calls George Floyd's family, but he doesn't acknowledge, hey, I was a big reason for the crime bill. I've hurt the Black community a lot. It's more just hey, I got your back. The Democratic Party supports you. It's not about hey, I've been responsible for a lot of racist shit that's structurally impacted the Black community in a very negative way. There's no conversation about that.
Can I add to that?
I mean, there never will be.
Right. Exactly. Ooh, don't do it. Don't do it. You're gonna come. You're
No,
gonna
go ahead.
You're gonna do it. You're gonna do it. But
I'll wait. I'll wait.
That's what I wanted. That's why I wanted to run for office. That's why I kind of throw around sometimes. I'd love to run for president. Not because I got the master plan, but because I'd be a person in that position who would go down to a town and say, this shit is fucked up. I'm sitting here in the hotel for 5 days, get the Secret Service, get this shit. I'm talking to your council people. We're fixing this before I leave. And whatever else is going on in the country, I'm not worried about that right now.
I mean, what, he was best friends with Strom Thurmond?
Yeah, exactly. Do something. Yo, I would. Oh man, you brought it up too. When Joe Biden didn't acknowledge his past, do that. I made a bad move. That's an L. You can trust me now. I've changed. I've evolved from that.
I'm gonna forgive student loan. I'm gonna greatly help out the Black community. Do something like that. But no,
the systems in place, the Republicans, and these two Democrats, everybody. Here's a list of everybody who's on board with exactly what I promised. Here's everybody who's not on board with that. Not even blame them, because the buck stops with me. Vote them out. You wanted it. These are the people stopping it. No, I'm not sitting here I don't want to reach across both sides of the aisle. I promised you something. There are people who are stopping it. I'm still here. I tweet about it every day. I'm trying to get it passed, but they keep side-eyeing me in the hallway. I don't like it. I'm gonna keep tweeting that until they stop side-eyeing me. And then, hey, common sense. Oh, that's what's happening. It's not bureaucracy. He's not failing on his promises, or even if he is, but we're seeing the mechanisms in place. A lot of people, you hear them talk about, and I think we brought this up, and this is where I'll stop rambling. Structural change versus just performative change, kneeling with the cops versus legislation. Okay, structural change. This shit hurt, right? You feel the same way we do. Okay, for the next 5 weeks, you just rail on anybody who thinks differently. Do you think that Black people aren't harmed by the cops more? Well, say it out loud. Oh, guys, look, now we could debunk that. People can do their own research because they're being pointed to. These are the problems that you have. These are the people causing them. You now know for the truth. Now what you gonna do? Oh, let's mobilize again. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, straight up. You guys have any responses to anybody?
I know that your next question is going to be about the Democrats. I'm just going to actually say what I want to say about what was just said for that.
Sounds good. Okay, yeah, I'll just leave this for anybody who wants to answer first. What, if anything, do you guys think this has to do with the Democratic Party? This, I'll say, alleged corruption, because none of it's really proven, and I am going to give Black Lives Matter, the organization, the benefit of the doubt. So, yeah, whoever wants to take that first. Yeah, you want to go ahead, Desmond? You seem to have a thought.
I have thoughts, but it's slightly like derailing the conversation a little bit, but not so much. Is that all right? Is that all right?
Yeah, that's okay. We can circle
All right.
back to it.
The Democratic Party is the corruption, as far as I'm concerned. So there is an argument to be made that they might actually, in a way, be worse than Republicans, because Republicans don't pretend to care. They just tell you that they don't give a shit. Democrats pretend to care and then continue to not give a shit. So let's have a debate later about which approach is actually worse. But when I think about what you're talking about before, you said you talked about what was the mayor of Los Angeles going out and taking a knee with protesters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Eric Garcetti.
So that is just that's another aspect, along with George Floyd's family getting a call from Joe Biden of just, virtue signal on top of virtue signal on top of virtue signal. And it's just, I am just tired of all the virtue signaling that comes from the Democratic Party establishment and their candidates and their elected officials and their media organizations and their newspaper outlets. It is a top to bottom grift. And it really does become so obnoxious after a while, seeing it all unfold. And so when I think about corruption in this particular case, that's the corruption that I'd rather focus on, because Democrats talk about how they want to help the Black community. And I don't see them making any kind of investments at all. Like you were talking about before, there's no real policy legislation, going after, the systemic poverty. We're not talking about decriminalizing drug use. We're not talking about eliminating mandatory minimums, ending cash bail, things of that nature, demilitarizing the police, putting in different housing infrastructure into these broken neighborhoods, eliminating all of these food deserts in the inner cities. We're just not seeing any real physical monetary investments into the Black community. And so when I hear the Democrats talking about, wanting to invest into the Black community, I'm like, okay, show me.
Mm-hmm.
That's not even a derail. That's perfect. That's my take. Yeah, no.
That's perfectly on point.
That right, that is the corruption. Is that even when you try to spin it in a positive direction, the party takes the platform that you're using and uses that to say we support it, and then you don't even okay, we're I'm not saying you got to. This is going a little too far into people's pockets, but let's throw some consistent donations in there. Let's get some, I don't know, state by state legislation. Let's do a Congress. I forgot the political term for it. But anyway, they're allowed to use a portion of their salaries and the current purse that they have to donate to organizations and connect them with the government. Let's get some government resources. Let's get some people from Black Lives Matter on a discussion about EPA. Let's get them one on the board. Let's get some connections. You don't even gotta. You don't even have to cap that you believe in it. We're just putting these people on we might not listen to them. When it's time for the Joint Chief environmental meetings, when it's time for legislation on law, let's get a couple people from the organization that we trust into those conversations, so at least they know, wow, they at least are now bringing us to the table. Because that was the whole point, right? We want to talk at the table, or we want to own the table. This takes no money. You don't have to campaign on this. They your guys. But we don't even get that. So I don't give a shit about whether or not the organization buy the $6 million house. Why Democrats don't say, all right, we're speaking out against this. Hey, that there's a difference. There's a point, and we're going to show that by saying, in that mansion, we're going to fund social programs, and maybe they could even start a school in that mansion. None of that.
Yeah. I want to say one more thing before we kick it to somebody else. I think talking about buying a $6 million mansion, Like, you could make an argument that that is corrupt, and I'll listen to that argument. I'm saying that I agree with that, but I'll listen to it. But the real corruption is how many hundreds, if not thousands, of Democrats across this country took how many millions of dollars of campaign donations over the 2020 cycle, promising change, and did literally nothing.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that grift.
Yeah.
Woo!
So and
Also probably took money from like the military industrial complex and other corporations that are directly negatively impacting the lives of Black and brown people right now.
well, I was just gonna say, in 2020, while Garcetti was out there, kneeling, with the protesters or whatever and promising change, Los Angeles was giving 50% of their COVID relief money to the cops. Okay. Promising
These
to
people don't need more money. I don't.
Yeah. And I mean that money was for stuff like improving the ventilation in poor communities, Black and brown communities in LA County, and they instead gave it to the police, you know. Uh, and so like for me with the Democratic Party, it's become about like making all these promises, right? But then doing the exact opposite in some cases, right? And nobody's putting their money where their mouth is anymore. They've made so many promises and they just have not made good on any of them as I see it, except for infrastructure, but I don't know anything about that. So I just I don't know. I also think that the Democratic Party, they serve as like an example, right? For smaller organizations. And I'm not saying Black Lives Matter Global Fund is a small organization, but um, a lot of times when you get really big, you look to that, the big they look to the Democratic Party as what can we do? Like what can we do, right?
Hmm.
And a lot of times what I see is you have activists that are doing the work on the ground, and then you have the big organization, right?
Yeah.
And the two are doing completely different things. I
Hmm.
mean, again, like I don't feel comfortable commenting on the purchase of a $6 million home, but one is buying a $6 million home while others are out having conversations in the community. And that's the same thing the Democratic Party does. You've got Nancy Pelosi and Biden and all of them having their, $1,000 or Gavin Newsom having his $1,000 a plate dinner, and then you have people out precinct walking in the community, like having conversations about what people need, like food banks and um, things like that, right? Um, and I just don't see the Democrats doing anything good for anyone anymore at this point, except for the ones on the ground, right? But are they Democrats anymore? Like myself, I used to be a Democratic activist, but I don't see myself being one anymore, right? Um, because they're so corrupt. They do not fulfill their promises and they use people. So, and I feel like they have used the black. I feel like in 2020 they used COVID and they used the black community to get elected. And now what have they done for either, right?
I got two things for you. One, they've been using the Black community long before 2020
Yeah.
to kind of get what they want. And two, don't let that infrastructure bill, like fool you. I mean, the only reason it got passed is because there was so much money going to
Yeah.
corporations in the building process. That's why that got done. It's because their donors told them to get it done. So that's
Yeah.
not a win for anyone. There's not even enough money in that plan to actually address all of the infrastructure issues that they said they were setting out to do in the first place.
Yeah.
It's just literally another grift on top of all the ones we always see. On top of increasing the military budget at the same time when we talking about like where's the money going to come from?
See, and that's what I'm saying. It's like I'm not trying to be funny, but that's why I fuck with the younger generation right now. Like I feel like they the shit posters that just get it. Like eventually, like, and I don't mean it to be doomeristic, but eventually, like these people will die off, and we're gonna be left with like the TikTokers, and they're gonna be like high speed rail. Fuck yeah! Like, why are we not doing that?
Yeah.
like yeah, and it's just for me. There's so many times that you and that goes back to what I was saying earlier, and that's why I was really fucking with Desmond, when you said, "Oh, I'm going to derail the conversation," like, nah, that was perfect. The answer becomes obvious, even if you can't get it done. Just be real with me. I feel like people forgot how to do that. I'm telling you, Black people are killed at a rate by police officers way more than anybody else, because they just have more interactions. The reason they have more interactions is because the police are placed in those areas that Black people are, I don't even want to say herded into, because that, like, but herded into because that's the way they want to. And then, of course, crime goes up. There are more people getting arrested for quote unquote crime. Like, there's more to it than that. Can you think about what would happen if all of your neighborhood lost all its money and all of a sudden a big force in blue just came through and was like, "Hey, we're the people who tell you what to do around here. If we ask you to move, you better move." Like, empathy. Just build me some empathy here. And the Democratic Party fails at that. They got the ads. I make some of the ads. I'm going to be honest with you. I've filmed a couple of ads for politicians, so odds are I probably helped somebody at some point. But like, you get the nice cinematics and the sunset and the kid hugging and the I want a better America, a future for all of us. You get in there and you just stay silent for 6 weeks and you're like, "I'm trying, guys." Nah, tell us what's up. That's why I kind of, I have my feelings on AOC in both directions. But like, yo, go live. What have I done in the last 2 years? This is exactly, you can look this up. This is all okay. Thank you. Just, you fuck with us, You're supposed to be the new age, the quick, the quirky, like, appeal to us, Do something that makes me feel like, even if you didn't get it done, I know you tried. And that's all I'm really asking for, is an attempt. Nobody in the Democratic Party right now even attempts. They get in the squabbles. I understand that there's a real play of racism going on. Like, there's real stuff. We're not minimizing anybody's actual direct harm. But like, as a whole, you're not pushing it for me. You're not doing it. Your whole thing is fucked. We need to get them all out. Like, sorry.
Well, we need to make it so the
think,
Democrats have to actually listen to the real left.
Yeah.
I would love to hop in.
Yes.
Now.
I wanted to bring you in anyways. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So I'm pretty sure that he actually brought me in here for the sole purpose of talking about, well, not the sole purpose, but like the biggest reason is the Democratic Party, because I do a lot of work within our local Democratic chapters. I'm in like all of the clubs and everything like that. I serve on executive positions for multiple of them. And so I think I also really liked your comment about like it being my age, like my generation of like the Gen Zers who are like really taking this up upon ourselves. I think that I have seen a lot of, I feel like that's true and it's also not true. So I go to like the #1 most political college in the country out in DC. Like that's where I'm at right now. But I can tell you that my professors, my classmates, they're still imperialists, right? Like they're still classist. They still have all of these issues. And it's like, sure, they might be educated and sure, they might be, in their opinion, social justice warriors, but they still have so much privilege that they literally cannot separate themselves from their own privilege. Like no matter how much you talk to them, they cannot remove themselves from that privilege. And I think what ends up happening is that these people tend to take over the conversations and they tend to be the ones who get into those positions of leadership within the Democratic Party. And so I think that there are a lot of people within the Democratic Party who do hold the belief system that we're all talking about right now. And I think that they're the ones being shut out. They're the ones being quieted. They're the ones that aren't being elected to be on committees. They're the ones that will run for office within the Democratic Party and can't get even like a position as a chairperson on the California Democratic Party. There are so many roles within the Democratic Party where people can change things and they're just literally getting blocked out. Like they're not even getting the opportunity to be able to raise themselves up through this organization in order to change the party. And so I think people don't understand, and I've been saying this for a long time, I think that people don't understand how much power we have over the Democratic Party. And a lot of times I'll talk to kids, like my age as well, but of any generation that thinks that we should give up on the Democratic Party and move on. And I think that there's some merit to that, because I think at some point, how much can you really change a party? And I think that because we only have a two-party system, people are forced into being separated into one of these two organizations, even if they don't fully agree with one, because they're not given an opportunity or the option to choose a third party, because that party doesn't have any power. But the reason that party doesn't have power is because we're not giving it the power. We could, if we all wanted to, of course, through legislation and everything else, we could push to create, a multi-party system. We technically have one, but it's not strong, to, push for more parties. But if people realized how much power they have simply in numbers, we could change the Democratic Party. But we could also, if people wanted to, move out of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party could split into two parties. A ton of people could join the Green Party or just be independents, right? And I think that we're being forced to make decisions because of the lack of opportunities. And I think that we can start to build those opportunities for ourselves. And the way we can do that is by empowering each other all the time, by not like focusing on the positive. Like, I don't mean that, but I mean like by encouraging other people and lifting everyone up. If we could lift everyone up to realize that they themselves hold so much power, I think that we could see not just the Democratic Party change, but I think we could see a lot of change take place in the U.S.
That's real shit.
I love that. That's
real
a lot of
shit.
positivity. You're fucking preaching.
That's real shit. Sorry, that not like I do poetry, so that was bars. Like, I fuck with that energy. Like, I'm not even trying to say like, oh, you should like run for office, but like that's what I want to hear. That's what I want to hear. Like, I feel
you
like
should write speeches for someone who runs for office.
Like, exactly. Like,
I have. That is what I do.
Oh, there you go. Because it's just there's so much truth in what you're saying that there's just this innate fear that you're going to get yourself involved in something that's too big for you to handle and it's going to explode your brain. And it's like, no, there are little tiny bits and pieces that we can all do that won't even take more than 15 minutes out of our day. We just got to get comfortable with knowing that we're not going to see it unless we all do it. It's the same thing as recycling. You recycle and you're just one day you're just like, damn, I'm watching people throw bottles on the floor. How much am I helping? That's because everybody hasn't joined in yet. And when everybody joins in, all of a sudden they're going to say, wow, my streets are cleaner. Did I have something to do with that? Yeah, we all did. See where it's going? And I feel like that's what the people kind of need. Just that one nice victory to say, yo, we all did this. And that's where we could have had it with the legalization of marijuana or the decriminalization of marijuana at the federal level.
Still waiting on the Senate, right?
Yeah, still waiting on the Senate.
It's not going to fucking happen.
No, not with Joe Manchin there. He'll collect some money to be the no vote.
Even John Boehner is now in the cannabis industry.
Yeah, that's not surprising. That's not surprising. The one thing I want to say about all this is, not trying to endorse, Andrew Yang at the moment, but I loved his idea about what he wants to do with the Forward Party, in the sense that he wants to kind of go state by state and implement open primaries and changing the voting system to so that everyone has whether approval voting, star voting, ranked choice voting. I think if we saw that be implemented across the country, we could actually see third parties finally enter into the conversation for the first time. We actually see someone challenging the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, because right now we don't see it because people think there's no viability. People are like, well, they can't win. And you're right, in this current environment, you can't win. So you have to change the structure in order to even allow a third party to be in play. But thankfully, I think I would also come back to something that you said earlier, Aleyah. You said, how much, can you change a party? I think on the national level, very little, but I think on the local level, a lot. And I think that's where people need to put their focus at. I think a lot of national change can start from the local level. I think what we're just talking about was just marijuana. Just from Colorado and Washington doing that on the state level, it's been like having a tidal wave. Like almost half the country has legalized marijuana now. You need to have these changes started from the literal grassroots. I've been trying to get involved with my city's politics recently, and there are changes starting to happen here, and it is a good thing. It's not great. We haven't done everything that needs to be done, but things are slowly changing, and that's where people need to put their energy at. Because if you put your energy into the federal government, you're going to give up after 2 months, right?
I think that's where political doomerism comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
focusing too much on the federal stuff.
I 100%, a million percent agree with that. And I think one of my friends that I know said something that really scared me, especially because of how many people agreed with him. But something he said is, I don't, I don't want to try and do all of these things that I was like suggesting, all these activist things. He said because three people run the world. He said three
Mm.
people run the world. There's no point. I can't do anything. I have no power. There's nothing I can do. And that really like upset me, I think on a really, really personal level. Because again, I think coming back to like the power thing, like me in a small group of like 6 people got the Simi Valley Police Department to do a bucket list thing, like a bucket list full of things that we were able to see done in the span of like 2 months. We were able to see them do all of these things, right, to support our community. And it was like that didn't have anything to do with the Democratic Party. Like the majority of the people there were registered Democrats, and some of them ran on behalf of the Democratic Party. But that wasn't something the Democratic Party was doing. So it's like you don't even need to be a part of the Democratic Party to try to get these things done. And I think that people are psyching themselves out by saying, I can't do anything. And it's like that philosophy to everything in your life is not how you should be approaching things, right? Like if you want to go to school, you shouldn't say, well, I can't go to school. It's too difficult. Like you got to push yourself to do that.
Well,
And
it's
I
just
think that if we
laziness,
can,
really, right?
no, I don't think so at all. I definitely don't think so. I think that it is so emotionally taxing to be doing all of this social justice work that it's incredibly difficult for people to stay in it. Burnout is the biggest problem that you will see with activists. You will start to join a program and you will see time and time again people push against you, say no to your ideas, say yes to your ideas, and then don't implement them. People change your ideas, and then because of that, it's like constant rejection. When you're getting constantly rejected, it's difficult to try and maintain that positivity that encourages you to keep going. And so I feel like if we were constantly encouraging people, they would realize that it's not that it's easy to make change, but that they can make that change, and that they shouldn't feel that they can't make change because 3 men run the world.
I guess when I say that, I'm not talking about people who are already deeply involved in the political process. I'm talking about people who want to be, but just use that as an excuse not to be.
Mm.
I definitely see that coming more from like the privileged. I would say it's less about laziness and more about the privilege of an action. Because when those policies are directly affecting you, like when you're a person of color and you're experiencing all of these things, it's more difficult to say, "Well, I'm just going to ignore it because 3 men run the world." Compared to when you're a white man, even if
Absolutely,
you're a
yeah.
queer white man, it's a lot easier to tune yourself out, to turn off the TV. Like a lot of times, I was in Democratic meetings and the amount of old white women who are like, yeah, I just turn my TV off these days because it's just so hard to keep watching. It's like because you have the privilege to do that because those policies aren't affecting you.
Yep.
Like that's the issue is that like people who have to do all of these things because they don't have the privilege to ignore it are the ones that are getting burnt out. And then the people who are privileged are making it worse by not helping or encouraging them. And then all of that labor is going on to people of color, queer people, and any other activist. So I agree that it's laziness, but I think that that laziness is due to the privilege.
I
And
think
to be fair,
you make some really great points there.
to be fair, I do agree with that, but I also would like to say that it might be a time of fear, for a lot of people that because we have a lot of generations mixing in once. A lot of people saw what happened when you attempt. I'm not trying to bring up like, oh, we're gonna have Tiananmen Square or whatever, but like we kind of had that. We kind of had militant police officers when Black people were just protesting "Stop killing us." They were like,
Meanwhile,
"Bet we're
white
gonna go harder."
supremacists just get to go right into the Capitol, no problem.
No problem. And we dropped that. We just stopped talking about it. Oh, it was a terrorism. You guys are blowing it out. It wasn't an insurrection. People are getting like, yo, just save me. But at the same time, like that's instilled fear. Oh my God, we can organize and really affect politics. We could put in a police chief that knows what systemic abuse is like and is unraveling qualified immunity. That what are they going to do to them? that fear starts to play into like the choices. But then again, so it's like I'm like a double harping. Like there is legitimate fear, but then the privileged few who don't have to worry about it take that and say, well, they're not doing it, and we're going to pretend we don't know the reason why, so we're also not going to do it. Yay!
Yeah, and also to be fair, a lot of the people who were storming the Capitol were the police.
Yeah.
They were like off-duty cops.
Hey, there were some black cops there who got like trampled and beaten on, got hit with fire extinguishers. So I don't think they weren't all
No,
letting
that's
them in the
horrible.
building.
I definitely don't want to diminish that.
Yeah, but like you're making a good point in as far as was seeing like how militarized the police is, and that might keep some people from wanting to be involved in activism. I know that what was it? I think something that had a conversation with Aston Mack about recently, talking about how he's had a hard time getting people to do anything organizational wise. Since it's kind of like we're not like locked down anymore, so it feels as though it was just convenient for some people for a while. So I also wonder if it is the privilege thing, but I do also believe that there's a lot of burnout for some people. I think it just is a person to person thing. There's burnout, there's privilege, there is some people who are afraid. I think it just kind of depends on who you're talking to, but I'm sure that in a crowd, you could probably find a representative from each one of those camps.
Yeah, I guess my last question for you guys is, do you think that stories like this overall harm the left and help embolden those that are more skeptical of the goals of Black Lives Matter? Why or why not?
Absolute harm for all the reasons that we stated before. And to even add one more, you're confusing people. I think that, and this is why I say, it'd be so easy to be a Republican, because you know what to say, you know what to do. And I'm not even trying to be funny in giving them credit or gratitude, but like as a party, you're doing the right thing by being evil, and you're all evil. Like there is no debate on where they stand on issues. And that's, you want to shit on, obviously they're wrong views. We're not, but again, like, but they all the same. They all have a script. They know what they don't react. They stay the same. They everybody's on that same page. That's strength. That's unity. That's why these groups, that's why they're able to pass anti-gay legislation and not have somebody absolutely railing or shitting on them for it, because they know nobody's bothering us about this. That's what the party wants. That's all we got to do is just give them what. But now, what about the Democrats? That how can they do it all together as one group, and they're evil? Yes, it was. They get to. He left. I don't know. Yeah, because I know you were recording it. Sorry. They get to group together. They get to do their own legislation. They get to pass whatever they want. They get to tax cuts. They get to do this. How come we don't do that? We want the nice stuff. Do you not want high-speed rail? I'm gonna keep bringing that up till I get it. Do you not want high-speed rail? Like, why can't you just group together and do that? Oh, so yeah, local, because at least then you'll say, I know my buddy in there. I know my mans is in there. I know what I used to say on the street when I was talking with him and we were smoking on the corner, saying, damn, I got big dreams. I know he's thinking about that. So he's saying, hey, instead of us putting $6-7 billion into our police budget, how about we lower that to $4 billion and give $3 billion to community centers? Because there's a lot of dope talent and they could use a spot to record at to get good vocals and they can't afford it. So how about we just give it to them? Oh, and that with the community. Oh, there's a new wave of music coming. There's a new industry. People are pouring money into, the growth of the.
And that's the biggest issue, right? The secrecy, the lack of just being straight up about it. The stated intentions are great, but just like the fact that they acted shady about it, I don't know. Just it brings up some questions. Anybody else want to respond to that?
Sorry. Oh, no, go ahead.
Go ahead, Aleyah. And then Heather, you can respond after her.
Okay. So what I was going to say is that I think the harm that this causes is, like, I know that we've kind of been putting a little bit of blame on the organization itself, which I think is valid just because of how much money it was and how little of it went to, or how much of it went to so few people. So I think that's valid, but I also think that this should be encouraging us to have conversations about that amount of money, because it's such a large sum of money that's like, we don't even realize as basic community members how much money goes into campaigns. Millions of dollars go into local congressional campaigns. And that is money that could be going directly into the people, right?
Mhm.
And so I feel like this is casting the Black Lives Matter movement and even the left in a bad light, but I think that is because we spend so much money on ridiculous things. Like, I think that we don't prioritize the left in general. I don't think we prioritize our money correctly entirely as an organization. There is no reason that my local Democratic chapter can donate $750 to this candidate, this candidate, this candidate, this candidate over and over and over again. Imagine if we literally donated those to homeless shelters
Yeah.
or food shelters
Yeah,
or
and then
queer
the right has no
organizations.
fucking argument. They have nothing to say.
They put all of that money into the military
Yep.
because that's where they prioritize their money, right? But they know where their priorities are. We say that we know where our priorities are, and then we don't financially fund those priorities.
Lie to people.
Or, yeah, exactly. And it's like, it's more than just lying. It's convincing the people that this is where the money should be going. And it's like, why? What
Gaslighting.
makes you think? What makes you think that we should be prioritizing this candidate who will be in office for 2 years compared to this child in a homeless shelter who has been in a homeless shelter for 6 years? You know, like, it make sense. It doesn't make sense. We're wasting money all the time on these stupid things. So I think that the left should be getting critiqued for wasting money when we could be funding those directly back into our communities. So I think that the negative light is being portrayed on the Black Lives Matter movement is propaganda, but I think any critique on the left over the finances of it is 100% valid.
Well said.
And I think that election reform would, about campaign financing would go a long way to change that, because if you take away the ability for people to spend, millions and millions of dollars on these like two big congressional districts, now you've got people that have money that they want to donate, right? I mean, because a lot of people that donate to campaigns, they're just looking for something to throw their money at. I met a lot of them on my own campaign. They didn't throw their money at me, but they were looking for somebody to throw their money at. And if you take away their ability to give so much, right? Like if you have clean campaigns, the Democratic Party used to be so behind clean campaigns. And I, left Democratic politics for about 10 years, and I come back and nobody's talking about it anymore. I'm like, what the fuck? because
Exactly.
because I mean, if you take away their ability to spend all that money on campaigns, well, now you've got people that are ready to donate to. Now you could start having those conversations about, oh, well, we've got this community organization. You can have candidates out there saying, I can only take X amount from you. I can only spend X amount, but here are all the organizations that I think you could fund with your
Mhm.
extra money. Um,
Absolutely.
I also wanted to say on the issue of the money, as we're sitting here and we're talking about a $6 million home, like, I think that a lot of people don't understand, like, in Southern California, a $6 million home is not actually that big. Like, you could
Mhm.
spend a
Yeah, that's a good point.
1.2 you could spend $1.2 million on a four-bedroom home.
Mhm.
And I feel like if they were more, again, like, transparent, right, about what they were gonna do, or they had more of, like, their model, like, their plan, right? It's gonna be a safe house. We're gonna have bedrooms where, like, victims of domestic violence can stay, or we're gonna have, like, a studio so creators can go in and use, like, the studio. We're gonna put in acoustics, whatever.
Yeah, no issues with that whatsoever. Matter of fact,
Yeah,
we all support that. None of us disagree
yeah.
with any of that.
I think everybody would be like, "Oh, yeah, for a $6 million home." Well, actually, why don't we up it to 10? Because in Southern California, a $6 million home is actually not that big anymore, you know? I mean, there are $1 million homes in my neighborhood, and they're small. So, uh, I feel like, again, like, back to that transparency, right? If they were talking more about it, I feel like more people would understand, and again, like, a lot of people don't realize how expensive housing is in California, right? Um,
Yeah, that's facts.
there's something else I wanted to say, but I forgot, so
I think in Ventura County right now, the average cost of a one-bedroom apartment is north of 2,500.
yeah, it's ridiculous. It is, and so, like, I mean, whatever, for $6 million, you can create a really good space for people that need that space for whatever it is, you know? You can't necessarily do that with only 1,000,000 or, 500,000 or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
amount people would wanna put into it, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
Oh,
Any
should I
other?
go now?
Yeah, go ahead,
Yeah.
Oh,
Desmond.
sorry. I didn't want to interrupt. Yeah, I think there's a couple different things I want to say here. One of which is I don't think that people's minds have caught up to housing inflation. So when you hear the figure $6 million, I think that we still have this image in our mind of what a $6 million house looks like. However, that has dramatically shifted just in the last like 2 years. I mean, even like looking at my town where I live out in Montana, houses that were going for $225,000 4 years ago are currently going for $550,000. It has gotten insane. Like I mean, just in the last year, the average housing price here went up like $100,000 in 1 year. And with that being said, when it comes to whether or not this story is going to impact the left, um, duh. I mean, I mean, yeah, of course it is, because the right wing, propaganda machine is relentless, and they're not going to miss an opportunity to bash them whenever they get the chance. And they've already attached this organization to the Democratic Party over years of propaganda. So why would they miss an opportunity to further, like pile on? They're not going to miss an opportunity. No, of course not. Unfortunately, it shouldn't. It shouldn't be this way. I mean, and also I want to circle back to whether or not like this was a legitimate thing in the first place. I don't know. I don't know these people. I don't know what their intentions are. I have no clue what they're doing with these donations. I don't know if they actually, have righteous, virtuous, things they want to do with that $6 million or however many $1 million they have access to. I don't know. But
Exactly.
but we shouldn't. I think going forward, as much as I have to talk about this on my platform or somebody else's platform, I'm going to relentlessly pound the idea that we should not be talking about Black Lives Matter, the organization, as the phrase, because that should be the permanent takeaway from this conversation and every conversation. And the fact that we've done that for so long has only emboldened right-wing propaganda on this subject. It's just made their conversation stronger, which is again it's an issue. I think talking about back to what Paradigm was talking about earlier about how these issues can actually impact people in their everyday lives. Because when I go out into an almost all white state now, I have to deal with more racism now than I had to before because of conversations like this. And like I have to deal with the repercussions of these situations happening. Like other people can talk about them in theory about how bad they are for the Black community. I have to live them. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's a little bit different for me when we have these conversations because I have to deal with whether or not I have to think about like, how someone might be perceiving Black people because of how the national discourse is going on right now and how that has to change my perception of any conversation that I'm interacting with a white person who I don't know for the first time and how they might be perceiving me in that moment, especially if they have power over me, like a police officer or somebody like in a doctor's office, like you might get different care there. So unfortunately, yes, to answer your question, this is going to be a damage for the left, but it shouldn't be tied to the left. And we need to being on the left, we have to uncouple it because it shouldn't be coupled in the first place. The elevation of Black people in this country shouldn't be tied to a political party, and we fucked up letting that happen.
Yes, sir.
Fuck yeah, preach. Yeah, what do you think, Aleyah? Are you
I
still there?
Yeah. I definitely think I kind of answered a little bit about my opinion on it being. I don't know. I think people just critique anything they can. Like I feel like Desmond made that comment very like much, but I think that people will literally nitpick and take any opportunity they have. And again, I also don't know what they're using it for. Like I personally think they are using it for a space for creators. That makes a lot of sense. Like if there's going to be a place you're going to choose to have creators in a house, it would be in SoCal, and SoCal houses are expensive. So I could very easily see how something like that could turn into a $6 million purchase. I, again, not my place to say whether or not I think that was an appropriate purchase, but I think that the effect it's going to have on the left is because of the propaganda and the racist propaganda on the right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what separates the left from the right, is that we're willing to actually sit down and have these conversations and separate those distinctions and, really clear the air for everybody that doesn't quite understand this very well.
And, I think one of the problems that, the Democratic Party especially, you know, as a part of the left,
And that's an
which we
issue
can
too, is
call
the constant effort to conflate the
yeah,
Democratic Party with the left.
with the left. But, they're trying to be like the Republicans, right? They're trying to be like the right and have, like, one message,
Hmm.
right? But they're failing because there are so many different, like, levels of being left, right? Like, there's the younger leftists, and then there's, like, the more moderate left, like some of the older people that you see, at the local Democratic Party, right? And so I think they have a problem controlling the message. And the right just they're all on brand all the time, right?
All the time.
Well, I think one
All
of the
the
All the
time.
problems too is like
Relentless.
I see a tendency for the Democratic Party to like play defense for the right,
Yeah,
and like they won't defend anything that the left does. So if the right gives them criticism, they'll just kind of lean into it and say, you know what, you're kind of right. They're not going to defend the left. And what that does is that weakens the strength of the left. And that's by design, because the Democratic Party is not interested in having the real left take over the party.
right.
That is right. That is a very good point. I would have never even pondered that. It's like these should be slam dunks. These should be the easiest things that you have to deal with. These should be the easiest issues that you could tackle, but you just choose not to.
Yeah.
Yep.
You just sit there and you're just like, oh well, that's
Platitudes.
bad. Anyway,
I mean, do you expect them to actually like compromise their revenue stream? I mean, when we ask ourselves why the Democrats don't do things, I mean,
Yeah.
the answer to all of those questions is money.
Yeah.
all right,
Yeah,
but
they
then it's
literally have
like
to stop getting elected. Like there has to stop being rewards for their behavior.
exactly, and I'm like, that's okay. That made me go on a tangent. Now I'm just gonna just pose this because I know this is off topic. I know we're supposed to be ending,
I'm
but
ready for
like
the clip.
that makes me think about the fact that conservatives love to say, "Oh, Disney's going woke. Oh, these corporations are funding all these. They were they were funding the bail fund to let these criminals out of jail, etc." Non grata. All these corporations giving in to the woke left, but like, if the left in office wanted to do that, then wouldn't the corporations, if they want to see, it's like
And all
how
these
they fund it.
corporations give a shit about is making money. And these fucking people on the right don't get it. They're just like, they're woke, they're leftists. Like, no, they're not. They just care about
We're not,
making money. They just want to
that's
expand their market.
oh yeah, oh Macy's is definitely gonna bring systemic change to the police. Like, oh yeah, it's happening, bro. JC Penney on that.
Ending homophobia is when you buy Nikes.
Like what I'm saying, like, oh, I'm gonna burn my shares. These companies support that. It's like, no, they support the military-industrial complex and slave wage labor and for children in other countries. And like you've seen the reports on I gotta burn them. They said black people are good. That's no good.
Colin Kaepernick.
We're gonna have to circle back to the woke debate because that really is its own panel.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
it
sure.
really is.
I'll definitely have to have one on that. You get, does anybody else have anything to say? And before we do closing statements?
I'm ready for
I'm
closing.
good.
All right, I guess since you're ready, Desmond, how about you go first for closing statements?
I want to thank you for having me on. My first time being on one of your panels. I've only been watching on YouTube prior to this, so I'm finally an inductee of the 805 Uncensored panel. So thank you for having me here. I think that everything that needed to be said was said very well by so many different people here on the panel. I appreciated everyone's insight. I feel like everyone kind of like balanced each other's out. It's sometimes hard to have these conversations when everyone's more or less agreeing with each other, but I think everyone brought their own different perspectives to this conversation, which I feel as though would add to anyone's intellect who was watching. So, which is the hope I think of having these conversations, is just to like hopefully like inform some people who might be confused or to clarify some things that are a little confusing. But yeah, Black Lives Matter, the organization, is not the same as the phrase.
Absolutely. Aleyah, how about we go to you?
I'm also super excited that I was finally able to get on your podcast. We've been talking about it for like over a year, and we just kept pushing out the date, and it just ended up never happening. So I'm really excited that I was able to be here today to specifically talk about like the Democratic Party and the issues within it. And so I really appreciate that, you reached out to me and allowed me to participate in this conversation. And I really appreciate everyone else that's here. Like Heather, it's really nice meeting you, especially because you are local. You're from Camarillo. I was like, low key, I was stalking you while we were having the conversations. I was like pulling up your Twitter. I followed you on Instagram. And I was doing a little bit of stalking on you. But so that's really exciting to meet another person, who's holding the same beliefs and value systems. It's always nice to like meet a fellow friend in the county. And then, Paradigm, Desmond, I think it's really cool that I was able to meet you guys today, because it's nice to be able to reach out more than just having conversations locally. So even though it is called the 805 Uncensored podcast, but 805 represent, that's all I got to say. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, thanks again, Aleyah. You provided so many great points, so many things that I had never considered. Paradigm, how about you?
Yo, I agree with Desmond. Matter of fact, I'm gonna push back on what Desmond said. I kind of like having conversations with people where it's just not like differing opinions and you have to prove what you're saying. It's like again, it goes back to kind of why I even named myself this. These things are obvious. I just feel like people don't get to say them. You sit in a group of people and you're trying to get a word out, and it's like, yo, I can tell you the real world effect of this. I can like what you're talking about is not important. There are people listening who probably are looking for an answer for why this hasn't been working and how they communicate that. Everyone here has given enough points that I think. And I always say this, and not to gas anybody up, but like these are the things that I want to see in college rooms. These are the things I want to see. Like, all right, let's get these into a lecture hall, and that's a class. You're going to learn about race realism by watching these podcasts every day, that these people that we've designated are even alumni or good in their field, and they're going to talk to the class, and you're going to just watch the conversation, live chat, reactions. Like, we could do that. But in order to do that, we kind of have to move past I'd love to prove and debate and platform people who are da-da-da this and da-da-da that. We got to move towards, all right, how can we make this bigger than us? How can we make that impact permanent? That's a staple. That's having a college course on Twitch discussions or YouTube discussions or podcasts where the people and like, oh, I'm representing CCNY and he's representing Harvard and this person's representing this college. And oh, wow, we got to, yo, they really said some dope stuff. See, I knew it. And then they can have their little arguments in the class and their debates and follow it up. Like, that's what I want. So, hi, thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much. I usually have more energy when I do this outro, but it's been a long week for me.
No problem.
Twitch.tv/the_paradigm_shift. Please let Twitch know to give me back my username. I hate the underscores.
Yeah, we'll do. Matter of fact, yeah, I was gonna have you guys plug your stuff too. So thank you for doing that. Heather, how about you? Last but certainly not least.
I always just love being on the podcast. It's nice. I think that for me, like running in 2020, like these are the conversation or this is the conversation that I wish I could have had like more often. And I feel like it's I really love podcasts or blogs or whatever where everybody seems to agree on a topic because then, you are able to elevate to that next level and you're able to have like that dialogue that, otherwise gets distracted in arguing about all the bullshit about the organization or whatever the bullshit is.
Hmm.
Um, so I enjoyed the conversation. I appreciate uh, being invited on and being a part of it because
Yeah,
this was
you
an
are
important
always welcome
issue.
here. Thank you again.
And then you can hit up my blog at schmidttalks.com.
Perfect. Thank you. Desmond, do you want to plug your podcast?
Oh yeah, sorry, I wasn't even thinking about it. Yeah, so my podcast is called Independent Thoughts. You can find it on Apple, Spotify. I'm now doing stuff on YouTube, Twitch, and I'm streaming on Facebook when the stream doesn't drop like it did today. So, gonna get that figured out in the future. But thank you for having me on. Check me out on Instagram because I don't like Twitter. So
Twitter's so negative, and we've talked about it.
yeah, I don't like Twitter.
All right, I'll be sure to add that to the description. Thank you again. Aleyah, do you have anything that you want to plug? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I have two things. Okay. So the first one is I have my own podcast that also talks about local issues. That's how, 805 Uncensored Podcast and I got together. As we had a little, meeting. But so that would be cool if you guys could check it out. It's called Radio Simi. You can follow us on Instagram. We haven't released any episodes soon for mental health reasons, but if you want to know why, you could just listen to one of my upcoming episodes. But for the second thing, this one's really exciting that I actually haven't talked about publicly. This will be the first time. But I started a company back in 2020 that it's very exciting. I can't talk too much about it for legal reasons, but it's a very exciting company. I started back in 2020, and the idea of it is to make it so that we can start promoting local protests as much as we're promoting these large-scale protests. That way people in small towns like Simi Valley still have access to know when protests are coming up compared to living in like Los Angeles, for example. So we need volunteers to help build the company up before we can do a whole lot of anything else. So if anyone is willing to volunteer, we are a certified company. So, we can offer you some legitimacy in terms of volunteering. But we would love to have some volunteers. And you can also hit us up on Instagram at peacefully, but it's spelled with an I instead of a Y, .inc.
Just followed the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And yeah, can you text me the exact name of that, and I'll be sure to add a description too so people can find it.
Sure, thank you.
All right, that is all I have for everybody. Thanks so much again for being here. As always, you guys can check out the 805 Uncensored on our social media accounts. I'm on Instagram at 805 Uncensored Pod. I'm on Twitter at 805 Uncensored. And this is going up on our YouTube channel at 805 Uncensored Podcast. If you have any questions or you have a guest you'd like to suggest to me or a future panel, go ahead and send me an email at 805uncensored@gmail.com, and I'd really appreciate it. Thanks so much again, everybody, and have a great rest of your night.
Thanks again.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.